Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
It would have just been negative to the business because we would have wasted all of that time and energy and effort preparing paperwork and evidence, taking time off, going to trial. And it was a big distraction at the time to our business. It was taking our time away from it.
As much as I don't want this to ever happen again, I would say if we achieve some of our long-term goals, we will probably get sued again. I think it's just part of doing business. And you know what? Next time we're going to be a lot more prepared for it. So,
welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we dive deep into one of the worst business experiences Ken and I have had to date. It started with a service provider that we had worked with for over 2 years saying, "Hey, guys, I have a new service that you should try out." And then it ended with a knock on both of our doors, a manila envelope, and someone saying, "You've been served." That's right, we got sued. We're going to dive deep into this experience and share with you our lessons learned. Ken, what's going on, man?
David, I'm excited to be on the podcast today. Everybody is watching on YouTube. I'm remote today. I'm not in the studio, but we're still going to deliver some, a kick-ass podcast. We're going to share with everyone listening our experience with getting sued and, how that went down, lessons learned. And also disclosure, this podcast is not legal advice or direction or counsel in any way. This is David and Ken's experience with us getting sued and how we handled it and lessons learned from that. So, yeah, David.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times when we jump on the microphone and record a podcast, we are recording a success story. We're sharing with the audience something that worked. And this is an instance where things did not pan out as we expected. And I think we came out on the other side of it, better businessmen. But man, in the thick of it, it was not a pleasant experience. So, Ken, can you set the scene for the listeners? What happened? How did we get sued?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of piggyback on what you said, David, this happened just kind of setting the stage. This happened kind of like Q4. So it's already a stressful time. We've got a lot going on with businesses. And here, all of a sudden we're getting sued. And so it was very emotionally draining. It was taxing on the business and it was not a good situation. So kind of setting the stage, like what David mentioned a little bit in the introduction, we had a service provider that we had a relationship with. We were working with them for probably over 2 years. And, they were providing a great service. This was their main core service. Like I said, we used them for a long time. We trusted them. We used them for multiple businesses and everything was going great. And then, we've even met this person in Vegas and had a drink, right? Like high-fiving, hey, everything's great. You're doing awesome. And then service provider, and also we're not going to disclose who the service provider was, protect his business and his livelihood. We're just sharing our experience. And so, the service provider was like, "Hey, I've got this new service and it's warehousing." This was right around the thick of the time when Amazon came out with their inventory restriction. And so, we're limiting the amount of stuff you can send in. So we're like, okay, we have another small warehouse, but we have several large shipments getting ready for Q4. We're like, where we're going to go with this. And so we're like, well, this is kind of a good fit right now. This service provider is offering a new service. It's kind of what we need. And he's like, yeah, by the way, you guys are kind of like our first beta clients. Is that okay? We're like, yeah, that's fine. Because we had a positive experience with them in the past on their other services that they provided. And so this kind of like sets the stage of where we initiate an agreement. We kind of go over it and we get onboarded. And then from there, everything went south. David, I'll kind of kick it back over to you for that part.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was a miserable experience. So in the midst of these inventory restrictions, we had shipments getting lost. We had shipments that just never left the warehouse. And then on the invoice side of things, we were getting double billed. We were getting billed for services that we did not ask for. And once our inventory was in this warehouse, we noticed that prices on certain things, certain tasks would increase up to about 500%. And we kind of felt like we were hostage, right? Like we're in the business of selling inventory, and our inventory is in this particular location. And so, I think early on there was some back and forth on some of the double billing and the issues with payments, but it was just an all around negative experience. And so, when it came time to settle up, I spent an incredible amount of time going through every single shipment we had sent to them, and then every single bill that we had received, as well as storage. So they were storing inventory for us. And
So David, how many hours did you spend on that? Just so the audience kind of knows.
I would say on this first part, probably 30 to 40 hours. In total, I probably have somewhere between 150 and 200 hours wrapped up in this entire process. And, those are all hours that I was not spending on the business, on growing revenue and net income. And so, but it's okay. I mean, it's in the past. And so anyway, we kind of got to the end, Q4. We were not happy with how things had gone. I paid all the bills that I thought were legitimate, and then I left the balance. And this consisted of duplicate invoices and all kinds of stuff. And then things just kind of sat vacant for a couple months. And there was a little bit more back and forth. And ultimately, this is what led to the lawsuit. There was this particular service provider had a large receivable balance on their books. Whether that was legitimate or not is to be discussed later in the episode. And so, so anyway, that was what led to the lawsuit. So Ken, did I miss anything in between kind of like the issues in Q4? Anything else we want to as we set the table?
Yeah, no, I think you covered everything. At the highest level, it was an unpleasant experience. We were getting overbilled, overcharged from our side, and David had spent a considerable amount of time trying to unwind everything and figure out from our side, hey, what did we ship in? What's there? What's not? And it was just draining. And there was there was not good service coming in from the other side. We were asking questions. They were not giving any answers. And it's Q4. So peak time, we're like, where's our shit? What's going on here? And so, yeah, kind of sets the stage. Yeah, I think you covered everything.
Awesome. So let's go to the day that we got served. You want to go first here?
Yeah, sure. Oh, just to also back it up a little bit. So this happened over a 6 to 9 month period before it came to a head, before it was shit hitting the fan. And during that 6 to 9 month period, we had multiple stockouts and multiple businesses. And so this was very high on our list of things to resolve. And so, we had inventory in this warehouse, and then WFS and FBA were out of stock. We're losing money. And so we were super pissed at this point of this is really impacting the business. And so that's when we got to the point of, hey, we got to deal with this. Okay. So setting the stage. So I knew ahead of time because David had shared with me a story the day before. I was like, oh man, something's going to happen and something is not good. I'm getting served papers. And so I knew that was going to happen. And so I have a Ring doorbell. And so my office is in another part of the house. And so I was just waiting. I was watching the Ring doorbell and, getting packages all day long, whatever. I look at it. And I see somebody standing out there with a manila envelope. And I'm like, I'm not answering the door at all. And didn't answer the door. And then what I failed to do was I failed to share this with my family. And so someone in my family goes to the door, opens it up, and I'm like, well, they're not going to be able to give this person the paperwork. It's not. And what they did was they said, do you know this person? And my family member was like, yeah, I do. It's so-and-so. And they're like, give this to them. And so they had served it through someone else, which I thought was really weird. And this person then felt really bad. Oh crap. Should I have done this or should I have not? And so it was just a very stressful situation and something that I don't want to happen again. Right. It wasn't my family member's issue that we had a a crappy experience in a business, and then they're kind of somehow involved in that. And so it was an unpleasant experience, something that I don't like personally, something that I don't want to happen again, but it is part of the space we're in. And so that was my thing. And then the kicker was the initial set of paperwork wasn't even legal. It wasn't even valid because this other attorney didn't even, what was it? They didn't pay like the court fee or something. And so the paperwork was invalid.
That's right. Yeah. No, I remember that, but we didn't find that out until much, much later. So anyway, I'll share with you my experience on getting served. So unlike you, my office is right next to my front door. And so when someone knocks on the door, I can go peek out my blinds and usually see like exactly who it is. Like when I peek out my blinds, we're literally standing like 4 feet apart. And so the doorbell rung. And if you sell on Amazon and you get returns to your house, you know that UPS shipments literally every day. And so when the doorbell rang, I thought, well, it's just the UPS guy. I'm not going to bother. And then the doorbell kept ringing and I'm like, oh no, this is it. So I went and peeked out the window, and to this day, I don't know if we made eye contact, but I think she heard something and looked over my way, and I ducked and got out of the way and was hiding.
Cover.
Yeah, I'm a grown ass man hiding from this person trying to serve me. And so I didn't know what to do, but I decided, well, I'm not going to answer the door and we'll just see what happens. Well, that person sat in my driveway for an hour, and that was, they must get paid when they serve. Or this is one dedicated civil servant.
Sat there for an hour in the driveway?
An hour in the driveway. So my wife calls me and is like, hey, I'm picking up the kids from school. I'm on my way home. And I'm like, oh no, we're going to get busted. And so I had to decide, do I have my wife and kids join this Operation Hide or just face the music? And I faced the music. She pulled up the driveway. I just made a beeline out to the car. I got served and went in and put the papers on my desk and dealt with it the next day. So yeah, that was honestly a day I'll never forget, but it's just all part of the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are kind of like impactful moments that we have and where we kind of think back on and pull experiences from. But I chalk it up to doing business in this space. I think it's a matter of how long you're in this space, and the odds are something's going to happen like that. And so, kind of moving on. So we both get served papers. You got served first. I got served second, and we're moving on. So, we're both like kind of not freaking out, but both emotional. Like, we're going to crush this person. Like, what's happening? And we're like, our wheels are spinning, you're pulling up all this, evidence and paperwork and so I'm like, I'm off to the races. I've got some family members and friends that are attorneys. I'm reaching out to them. Hey, can you take a peek at this? Is this legitimate? Is this not? Get some advice like, hey, these are legitimate papers that you need to like respond and do something here, or, you're at risk. And so called around. I spent the next couple of days, we both researched. I called around. I talked to about 4 or 5 different attorneys in this, corporate litigation in this space. And I think the cheapest any of them would like more than a text message or a 30-second phone call. They wanted 10,000 cash for retainer. And this was just to look at the paperwork and see what's going on. And I was like, this is like insane. And a couple of them, a friend of mine, family member was like, hey, this, like, if you take this to trial with what you're showing me here, like, you're probably looking at about 50 grand. And, the entire like disputed amount was not even that. And I'm like, this is insane, but again, we're going through this emotional process. We're pissed at this service provider. They provided, crappy service. Like, we have mountains of evidence. And so, David, I think at that point, you and I felt like, yeah, we're just going to take this and we're going to crush them, and so I think we sat on it for 2 or 3 days. We had 10, 15 days to respond or something like that. And so we sat on it for a few days, and then, something like very impactful happened. I think it was on that Monday. I think we slept on it over the weekend. We kind of cleared our mind. And then on Monday, we, you and I got on the call, and we need to think about the best decision for the business and not emotions, because we were coming at it from emotions. We were pissed off. We wanted to like sink our teeth in and we wanted to like do some damage. But when we like paused and looked at the numbers and was like, hey, this is what we're up against. This amount of money, there's very little return on our end. If we went into a trial and won, very little return. I don't even know if we would have broke even, and nothing would have, it would have just been negative to the business because we would have wasted all of that time and energy and effort preparing paperwork and evidence, taking time off, going to trial. And it was a big distraction at the time to our business. It was taking our time away from it. And so when you had mentioned like, we need to look at this from a business case of like, what's best for the business, I think that's when really the tide turned for us and we kind of pivoted into a better path. Can you speak to that a little bit, David?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that bothered me about pursuing counsel and hiring an attorney was it was kind of an unknown amount. So we knew what the disputed amount was. That was a fixed amount, but you start with a $10,000 retainer and then fees go up from there. And I, in my previous line of work, did a fair amount of litigation support. And when I would look at those attorney bills, I would say between 25 to 50% of their time was spent getting them up to speed, just kind of getting them the information and getting it in a way that they can understand it and form an argument around it. And my thought was, there is no one that knows this information better than me. Like I've already spent, at this point, I'm probably 80 or 100 hours into this, unwinding invoices, finding old emails. Like I was in it deep, and I did not want to spend time getting somebody else up to speed to kind of explain what I already knew. And so we made the decision to self-represent, which probably some people would advise against this. Again, this isn't legal advice. This is just what we did. And so, we decided to self-represent. A couple things that really helped out here. Got on the phone and called the courthouse and said, hey, I think we want to file an extension. How do we do that? And the key was finding a really helpful person on the other end of the phone, not calling around lunch, not calling at 4:45 on a Friday. I mean, just like using common sense and really trying to connect with somebody on the other end of the phone. We ended up getting in touch with somebody at this particular municipality, and they were a tremendous amount of help in terms of like what we needed to file. And we essentially, through using Google, became lawyers. I mean, or acted in that we were filing the type of paperwork that an attorney would. And so was that challenging? Yes. Would I pay 10 grand to have an attorney file that on behalf of me? Absolutely not. Not in this instance. If the stakes were a little bit higher, we certainly would have considered counsel a little bit more. But again, it's just kind of that cost benefit. So anyway, so at this point in the story, we've got sued, we've got served papers, and we decided that we're gonna self-represent here. Sorry to interrupt the episode. You may have heard Ken and I talking recently about a new tool that we're using for Amazon refunds. Now, I have used other refund tools like this. However, I can tell you in the first 7 days, they scrubbed the back end of my Amazon account going back 18 months and found $5,000 of refunds. And the nice thing about this is it's my money. Amazon made a mistake and they are just auditing my account. The other thing I really like about this tool is there is no monthly fee. They only charge a commission if they are successful in getting you your money. Go to Getida.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM for Firing the Man, FTM400. This is an awesome tool. Can't say enough good things about it. Now, back to the episode. So what came next?
Yeah, sure. So at that point, and again, I don't dislike attorneys. Attorneys serve a purpose. They trade their time for money, and their time is a premium, right? And so anytime you engage an attorney, the only way they're making money is charging you what's called billable hours. And so in David's previous career, previous life, I should say, he had a lot of experience with attorneys and billable hours. And I've had some experience in my life with that, and it's not a good situation. You don't want to see billable hours with a little X by it and then a big number behind that, because the amount's going to be massive, right? attorneys go to school for a long time. When they're working, they're wanting to get paid well for their time. And, depending on the size of your company, you will have to really think about it's a business case. What kind of exposure do you have for your business with this? And what is going to cost you, and then what's the upside and what's the downside? And so every case is different. This isn't legal advice. This is just the path that we chose for this specific situation. And so we decided to self-represent. We filed these forms. We pretty much got to a standstill, and we were essentially like ready to go to a trial. We essentially said, this is not like what they said is not true. And here we have all of our evidence right here. And we were about to file and go to a trial. And then David and I had another like one-on-one, heart to heart. We're like, whoa, let's like pause and figure this out. I said, before we do this, like, cause we're going to go down a rabbit hole if we go to a trial. Let's see if we can just settle it out and get it taken care of. So, and again, this person's not a bad person. I will never do business with this person again, ever. I don't even know that I would recommend him, but the 2 years prior to this person provided a great service, and he's not a bad person. This was just this bad situation. And so I called this person up. I texted him and said, hey, can we hop on a call? And got on a call. This person, he was also running a business and dealing with this on the other side of it. So it was taking his time away too. And so I think anytime we deal with the situation, I think, I learned this a long time ago in psychology. If you can get inside someone else's head of what they're looking for, what they need, things like that, it will help you like a solution to a problem. And so after talking with this guy, I knew he was frustrated. I knew he didn't want to spend any more time on this. And I knew his attorney was charging him a shit ton of money because he told me. And so I essentially like put a little bit of pressure on there and said, hey, what is this going to take for this to go away, for none of us have to deal with it? And so we like figured it out on the phone, and pretty much that was the end of it. We kind of talked through it and said, what's going to make you satisfied? And we hashed it out, kind of like we avoided a trial. And so we avoided all of those like costs, all those billable hours that we were going to pull the trigger on. And it was like, I remember when I had the conversation, I told David, I had a conversation. This is going to be going away. And like at that point in time, David, like when I shared that with you, like, how were you feeling whenever you heard that?
Oh man, it felt great. It felt great. It seemed like we were going to finally put this in the rearview mirror and be able to focus on business. And just to like, not to go on and on about how stressed out I was, but to kind of set the scene at this point in time that this dispute starts, I am less than a year out from firing the man. I would say like generally in our partnership, I kind of take care of like the paying the bills and finances. And this was something that dealt with your companies that, you brought into the partnership. And so there was a lot of different things and also I'd never gone through it before. And so when Ken got on the phone and was the good cop, which he often is, which I love him for it, and reached that resolution, it was the best thing for the business. And that was our goal. However, I can tell you that when I sent that wire over, I was still thinking in the back of my head, this is absolute horseshit. Some of this payment represents duplicate invoices. I know it and I can point to it. But again, we had to ask ourselves what is best for the business. And this settlement was. And so it's interesting thinking of it on the other side. Lawsuits, I would say lawsuits in the 5-figure range. Boy, you really pressure people into settling. Like even if they're in the right, because they have to weigh out, what if I hire counsel? What is the cost to my business? And so effective strategy. I mean, it worked. I'm not happy about it, but yeah. So that was the end of this story. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we came out on the other side of this better businessmen. I truly believe that. And so let's go through some of the lessons that we learned. And one, how would we prevent this from happening? Or two, if it happens again, what do we do?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We have a list of lessons learned here, and we're going to share them with the audience. And yeah, I would agree with David. Like, the longer you're in business, this is likely going to happen, and just try to pull the positives out of this. The first one here, phone calls are convenient, but email communication is preferred if you ever need hard evidence to put forth. And this is absolutely true. And so emails you can use as evidence in court. And so any kind of phone calls, you're not going to, unless you have some kind of device that you're recording and taping, and it goes into like a legal like wormhole with what state you're in and wiretap, all this other garbage that this isn't legal advice, but emails, if you're going to have communication, use emails, and then you can save those emails and pull them up. That's definitely helpful.
Absolutely. We ran into this where I would hop on the phone and say, hey, this shipment is 6 weeks late. What's going on? I was told, hey, we're going to waive the fees for that. That's our bet. And in that lack of documentation bit us in the ass in the end. And so that's something that, as much as I love to hop on the phone on things like this, I think I'm going to use email as preferred communication going forward. So, I think communication earlier on would have helped our cause. And this is in hindsight. I would say there was a period of time between the dispute and the lawsuit that we had kind of taken the approach of the hell with you. I mean, we have identified what we believe is fair. Unless you can show us something otherwise, we're not going to pay you. I mean, that was our stance. And, in hindsight, I think it would have been helpful to jump on a call, go through a screen share, go through, I had spent a tremendous amount of time building a spreadsheet, and simply just sending it over like a big complicated spreadsheet isn't as helpful as like spending a half hour and walking someone through it and saying like, here's what we're seeing on our end. Do you see something different? And I would imagine that may have prevented the counterparty in this suit to not seek counsel. So Ken,
yeah, for sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, no, I totally agree. And in hindsight, one of the lessons learned on our side was, like David mentioned, I think we could have communicated more earlier on. We kind of got to a standstill of like, hey, we're in the right. We're not going to deal with you anymore because you're not relevant, or you're not providing any value here. You're just telling us the same thing over and over. And we just pretty much stopped communication. I think if this situation happens again, I think we can do better there. Next one on the list is, do not volunteer to be the first client of any new service for your business, no matter how much you trust the person. And this is this instance where we have been doing business with this person for several years, had a great experience. And then all of a sudden, hey, by the way, I have this new service. Do you want to try it out? And if I hear that again, I'm going to run the other direction. And so this is something that we have employed since in our business, is that if we're looking for a new service, we evaluate multiple service providers and we look for a historical proven success before we ever jump onto a service provider. And so this is crucial. Yeah, that was a huge lesson that we learned there. David, what's the next one?
I would say that getting sued can happen to anybody, and it kind of goes along with operating a business. I remember right in the middle of this, I was talking to one of my mentors, and they said, you know who doesn't get sued is people that don't have successful businesses, because there's nothing to go after, right? He was like, look at Mark Cuban, look at Elon Musk, you look at any successful entrepreneur. Not only have they been sued, they've been sued a lot. And that is telling that they create value, and there are people that want to go after that value. And so, to look at this through a different lens, I guess good for us that we got sued. We were big enough, and I guess there was enough meat on the bone that the counterparty thought it was going to be worth it. And so, yeah, I would say it can happen to anybody. And, as much as I don't want this to ever happen again, I would say if we achieve some of our long-term goals, we will probably get sued again. I think it's just part of doing business. And you know what? Next time we're going to be a lot more prepared for it. So yeah, what about you? Any other key takeaways?
Yeah, probably the next one on the list here is, it's probably one of the most important ones that I took away from this experience. And I give David a lot of credit. And it's, when something like this happens, and you can use this on any instance, try to separate emotions for what's best for the business. And so when this was happening, I was so fired up. I wanted to take action. I wanted to, we were both very fired up that first few days. And then we took the weekend to think about it and calm down. And then David came and said, hey, I don't like this as much as you do, but at the end of the day, this is a numbers game. And David always comes to the table with numbers. And he was like, this is what we're looking at. If we go down this path, we're looking at this number. If we go down this path, we're looking at this number. And whenever you look at it from that aspect, it paints a very clear picture on And if you can pull the emotions out of it, that's going to be the path you should probably take is what's best for the business. And so, yeah, that was a huge lesson learned that came out of this for me.
I'll tell you, going along with that, like trying to leave emotions out of decision making. I read this in a Tim Ferriss book. I don't remember which one, but the phrase sleep on it, like if you have a big decision, sleep on it, that exists in every language. Like that translates in every language. And there's a reason for that. That like as human beings, if we have a big decision, literally sleeping on it, like taking a day, creating some separation in between you and that source of negative emotion, or in our case, the lawsuit, is incredibly helpful. And I would say when we were riding that roller coaster of emotions, I'm glad we didn't make any decisions. Like we took several days to mull over it. And I'm glad that we did that, because this whole story could have taken a completely different turn after one of the Zoom calls that you and I were both, getting fired up about the situation. And so anyway, I would say last key takeaway is getting sued is not the end of the world. It is unfortunately part of doing business. Sometimes I can say that you kind of hedge your risk by doing business with good people. And how you find good people, good references, asking around, interviewing several different parties. That was something we were kind of in a pinch here with the inventory restrictions, and we skipped that step. We didn't interview several different warehouses. We were just like, we're going with this one because that's the one right in front of us. And so anyway, again, a lot of lessons taken out of this. And I hope that to any of our listeners, if you have been sued or, maybe potentially sued in the future, hopefully there's something that you can take away from this that'll help the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just wanted to echo what David mentioned. Getting sued's not the end of the world. Just hit it head on, figure it out. There's going to be another side to it. And so hopefully, again, this is not legal advice. Just David and I sharing our story, our experiences. Yeah, hopefully you get some value out of it.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's Firing the Man podcast. If you like this episode, head on over to firingtheman.com and check out our resource library for exclusive Firing the Man discounts on popular e-commerce subscription services. That is firingtheman.com/resource. You can also find a comprehensive library of over 50 books that Ken and I have read in the last few years that have made a meaningful impact on our business. For that, head on over to www.firingtheman.com/library. Lastly, check us out on social media at Firing the Man and on YouTube at Firing the Man for exclusive content. This is David Schomer.
And Ken Wilson.
We're out. Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?